Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing great today and enjoyed these stories. My voice has gone pretty much back to normal and I'm mostly over my cold now, so I'm feeling a lot better. Thank you for the kind wishes, I really appreciate it. I hope everybody's doing great and enjoys these stories. Take care and I'll speak to you all soon. I posted this comment before, but this happened in East Tien around 2006 or 7. A buddy and I were doing some trips and hiking through the woods when we heard this sound like electricity. Like a lot of electricity. We'd been hiking for days and were in the middle of nowhere on the Appalachian Trail, so we followed the sound and found an overgrown game trail which led to a clearing with an old barn in it. The barn was on a mound of dirt and was the kind with big space in the middle. As we got closer, the sound got louder and louder, and we quickly realized that the entire dirt mound was covered in mud wasps, literally thousands of them. I've never seen anything like it, but wait, there's more. As we circled around, we noticed another trail and followed it to a tiny old cabin built by Boy Scouts like 100 years earlier. There was a little engraving which actually said as much, and we decided to stay there for the night since it's becoming late. So we built a fire, and just before dark, we heard the sound, and out of the bushes came an old man with those two metal hiking poles. He ended up sitting around the fire for a long while telling us stories about the area, then he quickly got up and vanishing. He left in the opposite direction that he come from. It was pitch black. The next morning we looked around and we could see no signs of him. Maybe he was just bushwhacking through the mountains, but it's almost like he was a ghost of the woods. So I was a wildland firefighter back in the day in Arizona. I worked in a forest that was generally popular with a lot of recreation in the northern portion, but I worked on the southern portion of the forest that was really remote. It barely had any roads or campgrounds, so if you wanted to relax there, you had to put in work for it. The fire crew I was on only had 2 duty stations, one in a small town where the rest of the forest employees worked out of, and one of them was about 2.5 hours away up a really windy mountainous road. The remote duty station had an old Forest Service ranger station and a newer double-wide trailer that was recently put in. When I worked at this place, I had no cell reception. When my crew and I weren't working, we were playing horseshoes and watching movies. They did eventually add a cell service booster, which sadly made people play on their phones more, but I digress. So for my creepy story, I want to keep it pretty simple, but my supervisor had the crew experience some weird things while working out there. There was one night that he told me he was cowboy camping, which is sleeping outside with no tent, and kept on repeatedly having weird things drop on his face like musky liquid. He looked around, even yelling out, but nobody was there. He wasn't below any trees, there was no sap. He never slept outside again after that. Now for my story. I have had other interesting experiences at a remote duty station, but this one was scary. It was the night of the 4th of July, and we weren't on a fire, so the crew was playing horseshoes and having a good time. Everybody went to bed pretty early because we were getting ready to have a PT hike the next day. I had my own small room in the windowed double trailer, and my bed was next to a big window. I started to doze off but felt awake. I hear one of my co-workers outside my window asking me to come outside. I was laying on my side facing the window and didn't look up, but I felt their presence by the window. I felt as though something tall was looming over me from outside. I kept beckoning to not go out there with myself. Though suddenly their voice gets deeper, raspier and angrier, eventually swearing at me to go outside. It was almost a demonic voice. I lay there frozen, not moving while being yelled at. Eventually, it stopped and I fell asleep. I woke up the next day and asked my coworker if he was standing outside my window, but he said he wasn't. I previously had a role as a fire service worker in the forest. It was a pretty good gig really, something that I still reminisce about often today, though I did have a number of weird things happen to me out there. Now I'd like to share some of those with you. Now while being stationed out there, if you're up in the fire tower, it meant that you'd spend lots of time out there on your own. I can remember one specific example of this having some, unexpected consequences, shall I say. Now the job was pretty good because I had another worker with me there for the first half of our tenure. Again, no issues, we get on really well. Actually, at the time, it wasn't so hot outside and we even got blessed with some rain, so it meant that the surroundings were far less likely to cause a fire. We also had some really nice streams and things which would actually make our job easier, because of course, you can basically use this as a landmark, and fire's not going to pass through that. So at first we're having a pretty good time, and we're just talking about all kinds of different things. That's when the other worker, I won't call him a friend because I didn't know him for too long, but he felt like one, said that apparently these grounds are haunted. It's something that I didn't believe. I told him, oh yeah, it's just one of those things that the other gamekeepers and the fire wardens have to tell us to make us all scared to be out here. But he said, no, seriously, I'm telling you, I even saw one once. I thoroughly doubt him at this and say, yeah, it's just you messing with me, right? He said, no, let me tell you about what happened to me. Now, I can tell you that I didn't necessarily believe in the paranormal, at least not in this specific time, but it certainly piqued my interest. So I kind of get lost in the moment. We're walking in a really beautiful area. There's lots of moss on parts of the trees. Lots of it's dead and dried out, but some of it's okay. There's lots of other things around which makes this place really beautiful, and it probably made it perfect for storytelling. So my friend continues on about what apparently happened to him. I'll re-explain it the way that I heard. So apparently he was on the trails one day and a kid ran up to him with a ball. I know that's pretty normal, but you have to listen to all of this. Apparently the kid didn't say anything to him, just held off a ball and smiled. He eventually threw it and kind of motioned for my kind of newfound friend to go and go after it, which he does. He thinks maybe the kid wants to play and goes to fetch the ball. He says that the ball's nowhere to be found though upon getting to the location where it landed. Pretty bizarre, he said. Doesn't think too much of it again. He goes to look around for the kid and he's absolutely nowhere to be found. It's literally as though he's just vanished, but it doesn't make sense because he saw him there so recently before. He says that doesn't end there too, buddy, to me. I say, what do you mean? He says it turns out that after doing some investigating, that kid died a long time ago. I ask him how long ago does he mean, and he then shares to me that apparently a kid went out here missing playing who got lost from his family and unfortunately passed away. The clothes he was wearing was exactly as to the description of when the body was found, and apparently he had a toy with him there, and it was just like the one that my buddy had found. Yeah, I thought that was pretty creepy. I say, but yeah, that was years ago. He says, yeah, but that's not all. There's some other weird things out here. Apparently, when you're all alone and you're just about to go to sleep in the station, sometimes you'll hear someone calling your name. And it sounds like somebody you know, but it isn't. Every time that it's been investigated, the person calling is nowhere near, even in a different state. He said, you know, buddy, just be careful. It gets kind of weird out here. Another story which he told me I find particularly odd is apparently he'd seen wolves before and some of the others had. It shouldn't be possible geographically because where we are, but apparently there's been times that they've been up in the tower and they'll see a pack of wolves come running through here, kind of like large grey ones, really big. And apparently something looks off with their eyes. Apparently it looks like it's almost pure black. The weirdest thing is, if you try and get close, there's no sound. There's no signs of them. You know how you'd expect to be able to at least find evidence of them being here? Well, not in this case. Nada. Nothing. Odd. I said, yeah, just, you're not going to be able to scare me. And we ended up changing the topic and continue throughout our business. He then starts to talk about some other things, and at the same time, I'm not trying to be Sherlock Holmes, but I'm certainly questioning whether he's of sound mind at this point. It's the only time that I've ever heard anything like it, and I don't understand why you'd tell me that. Why on earth would you give me all these weird warnings and put all these horrible thoughts into my head just before you know I've got to be out here alone? Yeah, right, you've done this to other guys, I think to myself. The more I speak to him, the more I get the feeling that he wasn't actually lying to me. I don't know what it is, just, you know, sometimes you can sense the truth of what somebody's saying, and I don't see what he would have gained from scaring me anyway, because I wouldn't have got to speak to him again after this, so it's not like he could have pulled a big old prank on me and then got to see me running scared, so that's the other thing. But yeah, we just continue about things like normal. I did really enjoy the job though. I was definitely due some time off, I can tell you that much. I've probably been working relentlessly for months at this point, and a break was coming for me, but I just had to wait a little bit longer for it. I don't know, I felt a lot of pressure too. You know, it's one of those moments where you get lots of pressure on yourself, which is self-created. It was kind of like that. So we start doing some other work, and we have to replace some boards and steps and things. They kind of come a little bit, not necessarily undone, but they start to slide down onto both sides of the hill if you aren't careful and don't replace them frequently enough. They kind of look like the wooden pallets, but more better machined than that. Certainly wasn't safe for anybody to be out here, so we set about one day putting them on. It was slow going. You also had to hammer in some mesh just to act as some kind of grip at the bottom of each step. Now, this goes on for pretty much as far as your eye can see at most points. Not due to strictly the depth of the forest, but just because of where we were and how windy the trail becomes. Now, as we're doing so, I keep getting a really weird feeling like I'm being watched. Now I look up ahead thinking somebody's on the trail. I go to call out, hey, you're not supposed to be here, we're doing repairs. And I can see a figure slowly move from the tree. I think it's at first some kind of branch falling. It kind of looks like a red swamp creature with weird white eyes staring at me. Maybe kind of like Chewbacca from Star Wars is the best way I can describe it, but more organic in nature. This, whatever it is, slowly goes behind the tree and I can't see it again. Being the great storyteller that my friend is, I presume that he's got some kind of Halloween costume on from one of those stores, but I don't question him on it. I just continue about putting our stuff away. Now, I ended up continually nowing until I ran out. I tell the other guy that I'm gonna go and get some more nows, and he says, yeah, take a break afterwards. I say thank you. I didn't realise how much I was sweating from working out in the sun, but I know I've got a lot of water to drink to be able to catch up with how much my body was losing it. I remembered I felt uncomfortably hot now. That's one of the things I didn't like about being out here, especially during the fire season, is it can get incredibly hot really quickly. Like I said, it had rained, but that was the only day of it. So I decided to eventually stop by the small stream which was running under where we were, and just take a moment to take in everything. I completely forgot about the thing I'd seen earlier, and just relax and let my mind wander. I remembered letting out a sigh as I realised we've still got another task to do. I didn't bring enough nails for this, but we have to put some red markers onto the trees so that way people know where they're going. I mean, it should be pretty obvious because we got our steps that we've put out everywhere, but a lot of people don't necessarily see these and just go off on a whim kind of deep into the forest. They can be good markers to use. I then see my buddy over by the nails and I don't say anything to him. I eventually make my way back up and I can't find him. I call out for a few times but I do not get a reply. Fine, I don't have to listen to any more of his rubbish stories, I think to myself. Now, I realise too that he's used up all of the nails that I've got. This is quite annoying because now we're going to have to go back once again just to finish off this job. To be honest, I was quite hungry at this point and couldn't really be bothered for this, so I kind of angrily head back to figure out where he's gone. That's when he calls out saying, "Hey, what did you do with my wood?" I say, "What do you mean?" He says, "Did you use all of it?" I say, "No, of course not. Where are my nails?" And he looks at me perplexed. I tell him that I seldom used any and that I saw him with my nails, and he looks at me equally as confused. He then explains to me that no, I have not took anything. What do you mean? And we're both very confused by this and kind of a little paranoid of each other. I then show him that I've used all of my materials in one area, and he actually does the same, so it wasn't possible that either of us could have taken anything from each other, which is pretty weird, which leaves the question, who taken them? My buddy was also convinced that he had seen me do the same, so I don't know what to think now. We then catch a sight of somebody jogging off. Now they looked pretty weird. They have sunglasses on and full winter gear, but by the way, this is pretty hot here. We call out him to slow down, but he just continues jogging. We can't see much of his face because he's covered, and I think, I found out who the Star Wars guy is now, finally. We both say how weird it is, and this guy doesn't look normal. He jogs off and we're convinced that we figured out where our stuff has gone. Now, we both bursted out laughing after a while, just saying how weird it was. We decided not to report it in or anything and just to continue on with our job. Now the going was easier from here because it was all downhill, speaking literally. We were no longer going up anymore, so we weren't going to waste as much water too. We would constantly swap roles, with one of us nailing onto the trees and the other one nailing onto the boards. That's when we catch the sight of somebody running in the distance. We can't figure out who it is until then it becomes obvious. It's the same person running with the sunglasses in the middle of summer. They were even weirder this time. They were literally running through the trees up the hill. I don't know how old this person is, maybe he's in his early 30s or something. Hard to say because of his clothes and how much of his face was covered, but he looked weird. I really thought that we were going to find him passed out somewhere and have to get an emergency evac to get him fluids or something, but that was really mysterious. Now, eventually we finish the job and head back together. We actually put some extra precautions down and some kind of barricade at where we were sleeping, so we didn't have to worry about somebody tearing it down in the night and maybe coming there to attack us. But it wasn't long later that we realised that this wasn't going to be the case, and we wake up peacefully in the morning. Now again, everything is virtually as it should be the following day, and we both feel pretty good at this time. Until, guess what you know, there he is running again, this time on the lovely trail we had just built for him. We both bursted out laughing, saying, "Hey, we hope you enjoy our new work for you," pretending that we'd done it specifically for him. It probably wasn't a good idea because we really knew nothing about this person, but it's pretty weird to see. He was running almost like it was from something, but nothing was there. We actually spent a while seeing if he was being chased by animals or anything, but it seemed as though it was only the spirits that were haunting him. We didn't know what to make of him, we just thought it was really odd, especially so early in the morning. Now the weirdest part? Sightings of him continued for the next 2 days, up until it was my turn to be there on my own. Yeah, I wasn't so confident and laughing now. I kind of had a cold feeling coming over my body as I realised that it was going to be my job to be here alone for a couple of days, and whoever this guy was, whatever he was doing, I didn't want to meet him. I played it off as though I wasn't scared, but I was really scared. I mean, are you kidding me? There's some crazy guy out here running on his own for God knows what reason, with seemingly no supplies or anything, just coming right next to us at random times. We probably saw him about another 7 times or so in total, but it was just bizarre. I just didn't get it. But anyway, it's time to say goodbye to my newfound friend, and maybe hello to the other one. I wasn't sure yet. He did tell me to be careful and again looked very serious. He gave me his number so I could call him if anything weird happened, and I watch as he slowly walks off the bridge into the distance. I smiled and waved at him as he kept going, and there was a weird feeling as he left. It was almost like seeing the last person on earth leave you and go away. It's really not a nice feeling, and it's a kind of loneliness that I haven't felt before, or even since. I knew as he went I was truly on my own there, so what's the best thing I can do? Just pretend nothing happened. So I go about my next few days, and again, act like nothing has happened. I'm effectively trying to create a false sense of security, and I have to remind myself that I'm in command here of the situation, and I don't want somebody to get carried away and thinking, oh, because I'm out here on my own, that means they can do what they want to me. I was especially vigilant of the weird guy in the sunglasses. Weirdest part, I don't see him for the first day. I even brought some extra supplies just in case he was weird and I could give him a kind of offering, but I just don't see him. I was even almost convinced that I'd seen some kind of animals running through here, like maybe the wolves, but I don't think it was. It turned out to be other animals, but not quite what I expected. I continue with my work now, and the scenery is still just as beautiful as ever. I remembered going to one specific area, and I was taken aback by how beautiful it was. You had a really lovely water formation to my left, and bushes on either side of me, and this really helps me calm down and feel like I'm at peace. That was until I saw it. Standing on the tree line is what appears to be some kind of witch, almost like it's at an altar. It slowly raises its arms up into the sky in some kind of Y shape, and this doesn't look like a Halloween costume. There's some kind of dark fur on whatever this thing's face is, which is very long. I then realised how tall it is. It's probably about 8 or 7 feet tall. It could have been standing on a rock, but it was at least 7 feet tall. It wasn't looking at me, it was looking at the ocean. I look down and try and find some kind of weapon, but of course there's nothing. So what's my best bet? Just to slowly turn around. I was a little bit tempted to try and call out and figure out what on earth this was, but then I realised it's a pretty dumb idea, because who's going to help me? If I get really hurt, then it's going to be a while before they radio in and eventually send out some help. Another weird thing in this moment is that it's moving in almost slow motion. He starts walking around the rocks, and it seems very skinny too. Again, almost impossibly skinny arms and legs. I really think for a few seconds that this is a jogging person, but it looks too different now. I very slowly turn around and start making my way back from where I'd come originally. I have to be careful and constantly watch over myself. I know it's only up to me. I then tell myself, be brave, be calm, and I then go off the trail to take a shortcut. This is a pretty stupid idea because I'm making lots of noise now, but I'm almost like a dog, just focused on getting back as quick as possible. It's quite sunny now, and I realise that I haven't got sun cream. I think I'm going to get sunburnt, but that's basically the last of my worries now. I just keep on going now, not looking behind myself. I start to think, wow, as if everything that guy told me was true. Maybe this place is really haunted, but what on earth had I just seen? I then realised something weird which had never happened to me in my career before this point. I become lost, like really freaking lost. I seriously don't know where I am. I eventually see back to where the water is, and I hesitantly look around to see that this thing is gone. I feel a bit more safe now, and realise that if I walk close to the water I should be able to navigate my way back. But this already isn't good. What if that thing's there? It's a chance I decide to take. I take my first step towards the water and I hear crash. Almost like something's fell out of a tree behind me. I immediately turn on my heel, run very quickly into the opposite direction from the water. I keep up a pretty impressive pace for a long while, until my thighs are burning and feel like they're about to give out on me. It's like my legs are not cooperating with what I'm trying to do. Left with not many options, I eventually get back to the station and I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. I can stay here and try and tough it out, but again, I think this is a very stupid idea in the given circumstances and what's happening right now. I then decide that the most brave thing that I can do is just admit what's happening and come back the following day. Yes, that's it. I'm gonna come back the following day, and all of this will just be a dream, I tell myself. I look through my binoculars, and I try my best to look towards the water where I saw this thing. And what do you know? There it is again, not moving this time. I'm convinced that what I'm seeing might actually not be a real person. Just some kind of, I don't know, thing placed there. People put weird art things up all the time, but this was different. I go to get some more powerful binoculars slowly, trying not to make noise even though I was miles away. As I grab my binoculars again, I look up, and this thing is gone. It really annoyed me because I wanted to see it from a safe distance, dare I say it. I couldn't find it though, so I decide to put my barricade up, and I go in. I then lay down, closing my eyes. I kind of half drift off to sleep, and then I'm awoken by the sound of my colleague. He's calling me. He says, hey, come here. I'm very confused, and I go towards the window expecting to see him there, having forgotten something, but he's not there. I try to figure out where he is, and that's when it hits me. He's not there. He's in the forest somewhere. I can't figure out the location of the sound, but he says, hey, come on, help. I need your help, I'm hurt. Something seemed off this time, and I look back towards the water, and what do you know? That's where the sound's coming from. Every time that I don't respond, it seems like he's growing angrier and angrier. And it's almost to the point that he's shouting at me. I don't know if I can bear this much longer. I pinched myself a few times and actually splashed water on my face to make sure I was awake, and yes I was. This was so vivid, it's reality, I realise. Eventually, I can just hear screams and I decide that I have to go back in. I go in and close the door behind me. And I don't know how, but I eventually fall asleep. I wake up again later quite delirious, to be honest. I'm very off with the time, but I eventually got myself back up again. I look around, and it's very early, but I decide the best thing I can do now is set out and leave. I decide that I'm gonna go back and call it in as a danger violation or something, saying that I'm in trouble here and don't want to be here. So what I do is get everything together and leave. My thinking is that whatever this thing is must need sleep, right? Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's slowly get a way out of here while this thing sleeps. I get everything together and I'm as quiet as possible. And would you believe it? On the second to last step, crash, one of the steps breaks. It could not have been louder, and it scared a lot of the birds out the trees, and I let out a slow sigh. I begin turning around, but then turn back and decide that I have to chance it now. I have to get out of here. The problem is, I wasn't very good at navigating in the dark. I mean, I'm not an owl. I don't know who is other than them, but I seem to be especially bad at it. So while setting out, I realise now that I'm a little bit lost, and the fear takes over once again. Now again, more scared than ever, I realise that I must try and find a way through this. And that's when I hear it, screaming coming from behind me. I take one look over my shoulder, and I can see something rushing from the trees towards me. I start running as quick as I can, and I eventually get to some high ground. I look around, and I kid you not, I can see somebody on top of the tower vandalizing it. I don't know how they got up there, but something looks really odd now. I can also see that most of the steps are broken. So how on earth did whoever that is get up there? What were they doing? I don't take time to find out, and I start running. As daybreak comes, it becomes much easier to navigate now, and it kind of felt like I was in a dream. I was tired, delirious, and it was almost like the saturation of light was too bright through the trees. It only left me with one option to keep going, and that's what I do. I pick up a pace like never before, and eventually make it back to where the car is. I get in there and I drive like God knows what Formula 1 driver, but I go quick. I go quickly over to our main base and report what's happened and say that we have to get some law enforcement over there, and that something's very odd. Now, eventually they go back and I have to go with them, which is really annoying because I don't want to go back there, but they aren't very good at navigating either. Eventually we see the tower and it's absolutely destroyed. Most if not all of the stairs are now missing. The windows are broken and there's glass everywhere. It looks horrible. Weirdly, we can't see signs of anybody around. Even a lot of the wildlife has gone silent, which is pretty strange. Now, you know what annoys me the most about this is they blame me for this. They blame me for the whole incident. I say, why on earth would I do that? And they can't come up with a good answer. I also say, how can I get up there if I broke all the stairs? And they tried to say I was breaking them down on my way, and it was some kind of mistake I was covering up, but it was absolute rubbish. And it's something I couldn't have stood for, and I resigned the same day. I don't know what ever come of that tower or that area, but God, I just hate the fact that nobody believed me at my job for what happened. I wish I'd taken that other guy's warnings better too. I've actually lost contact with him since, but I wish I could talk to him. I hope that he hears my story because I'd love to hear his perspective on all of this and wonder what he had actually seen out there. I'm in my college days now, and 20 years ago, me and my friends took off for the North Georgia mountains on the weekend. We wanted to smoke and drink and communicate with nature, and the mountains are perfect for this. On the weekend, this unsettling event occurred to me, my friend Bill, and his German Shepherd Monty, as we headed out towards the Sky Valley. It was the beginning of the fall semester at UGA, and we're not going there just yet, but we had found an area with a dirt road that led back half a mile, and then we would hike in another mile or so and set up camp near a creek. Excellent trails were nearby with fun places to explore, not to mention flat ground perfect for setting up camp. Bill and I arrived at our spot at around 4 PM and get a fire going. We were musicians, Bill a guitar player and me a percussionist, so we start jamming. Around 10 after jamming a while, we chatted about life and girls before getting in for the night. It's a clear night, so we just sleep under the stars. It is an important note that we had never seen any signs of other people in the area during our trips. At about 2 AM in the morning, I was awoken by Monty growling. It's a deep, weird growl. Bill was still dead to the world, and I woke up to listen. Maybe an animal has come near our campsite. The fire was only embers now. I heard barely audible voices in the distance. Focusing on the area of the voices, I see a faint red glow followed by another one about 100 yards away. My mind connects to what I'm seeing. Their cigarette embers getting closer. Bill, get up. Bill rose from his sleep, and I explain what's going on. Now Monty starts barking at the strangers. Now the thing that's weird is they're completely unfazed by a now rabid 70-pound German Shepherd and two people getting up. Now, Bill told Monty to calm down, and I'll never forget when I saw those guys, skinny as hell, about 5'8", shirts caked in grime and mangly beards, and probably 5 teeth between them, each of them having massive knives on their belt buckles. "What are you boys doing out here? Looks like fun," they said. We responded and told them that we've been out here to drink some beer. They ask if we have any drugs and stuff. They look around for a bit, and they say, "Do you want to smoke with us?" And we decline, saying we're heading out. Throughout the conversation, anything Bill or I said, they kept looking at each other first before responding. Before they left, one of them said, "Stay safe, you never know who could be out here," followed by maniacal laughter as they walked away. We packed up and left early. Now, while this isn't the scariest of stories, these guys were definitely weirdos out there, and they shouldn't have been. I don't know why they weren't scared of the dog either. That's what creeps me out. Maybe a year ago, I went down to my cabin near Victoria, Illinois. It was late fall, awfully chilly, but it was late at night, and I'd just gotten my four-wheeler, which is a 1986 Suzuki. Deep in the woods, it's a fishing and hunting community that I know well. I've been hiking and riding in these woods since I was little. I know them very well. Lots of folks and people have died in those woods, but maybe I was being hunted. Now, I was 17 at the time, and me and my family had just come down there from our home in the suburbs near Chicago. It was late at night, but I really for some reason had an extreme desire to go ride my four-wheeler. I took a quick ride through the hunting trail's pitch black path outside. I have really bright headlights, so it was perfectly alright for me. I can see well, and I rode home, built a fire and went out again. I was out riding on one of the main dirt roads near our machine shed, where we keep tractors and stuff, and my four-wheeler stalled. I got off it and began making adjustments to the carburetor so I can make it run again. In the process, I shut off the headlights. As I made my adjustment, I heard a twig snap and I perked up but could barely see anything to keep working. Suddenly, I come across a two-tone whistle maybe 100 feet away from me. I looked in the direction it come from but can't see anything. I quickly made an adjustment and stood up. I heard extremely fast footsteps coming towards me and the whistling again, only much closer and the exact same tone maybe 10 to 15 feet towards me. I started my four-wheeler carefully and creeped out and sped off towards a bunch of houses that had outside lights turned on. I looked around and saw nothing. I rode past the same spot at full speed to get back home, but by the time I was home, my fire had went out and they had gone to bed. I sat in our family room for maybe 5 to 6 hours with my gun loaded, staring at the windows, and I hear a loud bang on the back porch multiple times. I run very fast. Now, I flip on a light on the gun that I had and see nothing. I slowly go back outside the house. Then, I wait and see nothing, going to bed. I decided to do some searching, and all I could find was the myth of a spirit of somebody who was killed ruthlessly, seeking the company of those who dared to horseback ride at night. I never experienced this again, but I'm always on edge nowadays when I'm out there. I hope it was an animal I heard, but it just seems too different. It was September in central Idaho. Autumn had come to the mountains, and with bow hunters looking for mountain goats, my cousin, I'll just call him Vern for anonymity's sake, is an avid hunter. He's been all over North America hunting various game, bears in Alaska, wild hogs in Texas, bighorn sheep in Wyoming, but his favorite hunting area was the Lemming Mountain Range in central Idaho. Our extended family has been hunting in those mountains for generations. We know every river bottom and mountain peak like many people do of their own neighborhoods. Mountain goats are a fantastic animal to hunt. They live well above the tree line in rocky environments. They are sure-footed and can climb near vertical slopes. Hunting these animals requires one venture into these dangerous areas. You have to be mindful as you pursue an animal like that. You have to be mindful when hunting an animal like that. One wrong step on a rocky slope or one loose rock could mean that you're never going to see home again. Vern was an expert mountain hunter. It's something he was born to do. Vern decided to hunt in the Hayden River area of Lemis. It's a favourite spot with most locals, and the area is home to plenty of mountain goats. The first mile with the Vern's hike was uneventful as he climbed up the mountain. The air was crisp, and his breath formed in great fumes as he progressed. The sun was just peeking over the mountains when Vern came to a small deer trail. He decided it might be a nice shortcut from his usual route and took it. A few hundred feet up the trail, he saw something odd pop out from behind a tree. He finds a man. He was dressed in a light denim coat and jeans and was carrying a small backpack. My cousin stopped for a second to get his bearings, unsure of where this guy came from. The man waved at him with both arms. One of them was holding an older style hunting bow. Acknowledging him, Vern waves back. Although the man looked to be physically fine, it was clear he was emotionally distressed. He yelled out something my cousins couldn't quite hear and waves his arms, indicating my cousin should follow him. Vern didn't get any bad vibes from the guy, and he could tell he was genuinely in some need of help. He began to make his way up to the canyon following the mysterious man. Vern could never really gain any ground on this guy. He always seemed just far enough away that he couldn't talk to him. Now periodically, the man would stop and turn towards him to make sure Vern was following. Every time he looked back, Vern could see the worry in his face. My cousin did his best to remain calm and keep a smile on, unsure of what to do or where he was being led to. It was peculiar. Vern thought as he hiked. He hadn't seen any other vehicles on his drive up the trailhead. Perhaps he came in from over the ridge. What could he possibly be leading him to? He figured out that one of his hunting party had been hurt and needed help. Of course, he wouldn't have had to speculate if the man would just stop and talk to him, or give him 5 minutes to understand what was happening. Vern eventually loses sight of the guy on a trail turn. The trail actually opened up into an incredibly steep, rocky, tailless slope. He looked in every direction and could not locate the man when he hears a whistle. Looking up, he saw the guy about 500 feet up the rocky slope waving at him. There was no possible way that he could have gotten up that far in such a short time. It just wouldn't have been possible. He still didn't feel any fear or weariness about the weird situation though. The man was waving more frantically now, practically begging Vern to follow him up the slope. With a sighing grunt, he started up the rocks. It was slow going. Every other step causes a mini rock slide and would cause him to continually lose footing. Huffing and puffing on the cool thin air, my cousin eventually made it up a small landing. It had taken him almost 45 minutes to get to that spot where he saw the man from below. There was no earthly way that he could have scrambled up the hill any faster. Totally exhausted and out of breath, Vern sat down on the stone landing. He looked around and couldn't see the man anywhere. As he scanned his surroundings, he saw something odd poking out of a boulder about 20 feet away from him. Walking over to it, he found a weathered boot, two actually. Inside of those boots are actually underneath a boulder, and he can find bones. Vern looked around for the man once again but could never see him again. Instead of feeling eerie or unnerved, Vern kind of felt a sense of release washing over him. The emotions aren't his own. What he felt seemed to come from all around him. He marks the spot with the GPS and decided to make his way down and call the authorities. The Lemhi County Sheriff's Office responded and had led him up to the canyon. It took 4 grown men to push the boulder out of the way, and they found somebody's remains. On the body, they found hunting equipment and some personal effects. Now, as a little bit of background to set the mood, I grew up in central New York between Parrish and Mexico. We can look up Happy Valley and see just how creepy the surrounding woods and fields and farms are, and grave pits and swamps. I'm outside roughly 90% of the day. I do firewood, logging, farming, hunting, fishing and trapping. I'm certainly used to the creepy stuff in the woods, so much so that there's a predator light on my walking stick, which is facing backwards with a red light. People deter tigers from leapfrogging them by wearing masks on the back of their head, but we only have fishers, coyotes, and the occasional wandering bear. So every night on the woodline, I have a pimp fire set up that I use pretty much every day. It's not uncommon for me to see raccoons. We feed the birds and even have a huge turkey deer/feeder. My house is basically a safe haven, and we constantly have critters running amongst the daytime, especially then in the night, making more sounds in the shadows. So you get used to the random ground leaves fluttering and twigs snapping, chitterings and whatever other sounds really. Now, it began when I moved into a good buddy's house. Him and I are very alike, hard-working outdoorsmen who hunt, trap and have firewood. I've recently gone through some changes in my life and I was lucky enough to move in with him, which is only 4 miles away from where I grew up. Every night, after working or running through a tarp line, I'd work on my fire pit, which I'm in a clearing of which we've made to store firewood. I then hear this clicking sound like a slower version of Predator doing his clicks. The sound was kind of random at first, but then I start noticing it reacting to me moving. Grabbing a beer, click click, build up the fire, click click, to a point that I actually get my knife with me. Now, I wear a headlamp and I have the lantern with me, and I've got the machete and everything, so I'm pretty comfortable but still scared as I yell into the darkness to come at me. So when the fire dies down, no more smoke for the pipe or hot dogs on my belly, I start packing up my stuff and get ready to go inside, and I hear click click. I look around for eye shine but see nothing. I move closer to the woods, stray a little to reposition my headlamp, casting shadows. I clicked it and it kind of responded to me a few times. I mean, it's freaked me out so much a few times. I've literally built up the fire just to walk away. Now, we do have nocturnal flying squirrels here, but they just don't sound like this. It's been a little over a year of hearing this sound, and I'm nowhere near closer to figuring out what it actually is. The thing that's weird is that it seems intelligent enough not to be seen and also to respond to me. So that leaves me with the question, what on earth is this? I'm a 17-year-old guy currently living in Phoenix, Arizona. This incident took place around 6 months ago on an overnight trip into the Superstition Mountains, which are about an hour drive east of Phoenix. I don't really want to say the exact location, but it was pretty creepy what happened. Anyway, this particular trail I was taking was an 8-mile loop through the canyon. Pretty simple in and out overnight camping trip. I had planned to go with my friend, but a last minute cancel on this part left me on my own. So, with a backpack ready and car ready, I decided to go on my own, not leaving the home on time and having some trouble actually navigating through the forest roads. I didn't arrive to the trailhead until around 5:45. For those of you who don't go backpacking, this is a very big no-no. I have about a 4-mile hike until I arrived at my planned camping spot, and it was getting dark fast, so I figured if I moved quickly enough, I could get in at least 2 or 3 miles before I have to find a spot. This strategy left me hiking in the dark on my own for about 15 miles of dirt road between me and anybody else. The hiking in the dark alone is scary, especially being on your own. Eventually, it gets so dark that I can only see where my headlamp is pointing, and that's when I figured that I need to stop and get set up. With only using the headlamp as my light source and trying to move quick, I ended up in a less than ideal spot, but there was definitely some burnt pieces of wood and the remains of a fire circle, so it appeared as though that there had been people there, but not recently. My first priority was getting a fire going. I scanned the area around me and was able to find some dry wood, and I get the fire going. I got my tarp set up and crack open an old chili mac I had brought myself and was very much looking forward to eating. I was feeling good, my camp was set up and my food was on the fire. The feeling of uneasiness from the hike had almost gone away now, but still remained somewhat. To fully understand what happened, I have to explain to you how my camp is set up. So I picked a small clearing surrounded by large pine trees with about 30 feet above me. Now, when you're in the woods and have a fire going, the fire casts a circle of light around it, and everything around the edge of it is pitch black, as though it's not actually there. I was sitting on the ground, eating my dinner, when a small rock about the size of a marble was thrown into my direction. I look at this tiny rock in shock, as I'm positive that I was the only person there on the trail that night. I immediately turn my light on and towards the area where I've seen the rock come from, but due to the density of the pines and brush, I could only see about 10 feet in front of me. I spent about 15 minutes in disbelief as I scanned the tree line that was surrounding me and try and figure out who's thrown the rock at me, though not daring to go far from the fire. In hindsight, it offered me a false sense of security. After sitting back down and spending the rest of my time on high alert, I am able to convince myself that I had somehow kicked the rock or it fallen from a tree. I went to sleep that night, not expecting the pure terror of which would unfold. It got the better of me. I woke up to the sound of rustling leaves, barely audible if you aren't searching for it specifically. Still in a sleepy daze, I listen as the rustling of leaves gets harder and I assume that they're moving away from me. I went to grab my handheld flashlight that I had next to me when falling asleep, but the more I looked, the more scared I got, and I realized that it's no longer there. I stood up in my sleeping bag, ducked out of the top and looked around. I was able to see a light coming from off in the woods. It couldn't have been more than 15 feet away. It's my flashlight, laying on the ground in a pile of leaves. This is one of the few moments in my life where that I've really been scared. The flashlight I'd left sitting right next to me, and I'd fallen asleep not only a few hours ago, and it's now 15 feet away from me past the tree line in the woods. I hurriedly get my boots on, clutching my knife, and I have my head on a constant swivel. I weigh the options. I stay here, or wait out the night, or attempt the hike back, which is 3 miles in the dark. I figured that whatever or whoever was out there definitely got the better advantage on me, especially if I don't have the light, so I decided to stay there, right there. Now eventually, it came back. I could hear walking through the woods. It was far off, but I could hear it. It sounded like somebody walking lazily by, basically like they're strolling around without a worry in the world. Now this went on for a good 3 or 4 hours until I listened to the steps getting closer and closer until they're only about 7 feet from me. At this point the fire had gotten very small and I ran out of wood in my pile. The footsteps stopped and everything went totally silent. I lay there still for 2 hours clutching my knife and prayed that I wouldn't hear anything else. I stayed like that until the sun cast enough light that I could see that I'm alone in the campsite. I packed my things and speed walked the 3 miles back down the trail I'd taken. I arrived at the empty dirt road where my car was parked and nearly sprint there and jump in. I didn't stop until I put 20 miles between me and that place. I stopped at a gas station in an Apache Junction to buy a Red Bull and mostly just see another person. As I exit the store, I see on the dust on the window of my car writing saying sleep well. A lot of weird things have happened to me on various adventures through the Arizona, but this was by far the weirdest and most scary that I wanted to share. There is a seriously deranged weird person out there in the woods. I hate the fact that they got so close to me while I was asleep. Now the following happened to me and a friend who also happened to be a park ranger. This actually happened from when we were much younger. Now we like to go exploring and doing different things similar. I'm not going to say it was something we are supposed to do, but often we do trespassing and whatnot. Because hey, when you're young you don't really think of how you could have consequences of things. I was probably about 17 or 18 at the time, so to be honest I wasn't necessarily that young. I was just kind of a bit silly and naive. The person this happened with I don't actually speak to anymore, just because of relocation, so sorry that I don't have too much more to provide on this. But basically, we had the grand old idea at the park that we'd always go to, that we should actually do some exploring once I've locked it and go into the forest. Yeah, I seriously don't know what we were trying to find, but at the time it seemed like a really good idea to do. So we decided that we would just hang around there for a while, and at least get an idea of when the security come. And basically at the exact same time they would lock up this place. They would basically close you into this area. All you had to do was hop over the gate and you had a beautiful forest to go and explore in. Again, no real objective with this, but we decided we're going to need some binoculars, maybe some water bottles, and that was it. It wasn't going to take us long to get home anyway, so we didn't have an issue with this. And one day, we decided now was the time to actually do it. So what we decided to do is when we were over there and we knew they were locking it up, we would go and hide under this big tree. It was a pretty cool one, kind of out of the way near an old cabin, so they would rarely go up to here. They would drive around though, so we sit and wait. We can see everybody else leaving here in their cars, all of the hikers and backpackers and whoever else. And there we are waiting. We wore mostly black clothes, so it made us a lot harder to be seen. Now the car eventually comes around to where we are, and I'm almost certain that they noticed us. They seem to stop for a second, but continue on anyway. Now we stayed under there for probably another good 10 minutes, and we can hear them lock up. There we are. We're here now. We made it. What to do next? Well, we slowly come out from the tree and our hiding, and kind of have a good explore around. I don't know why the whole vibe just felt so much different being there in the dark. Weirdly, it was almost like meditation, and it was really like your mind become completely free. I think it might have been because of how quiet it was. We were completely oblivious to the potential danger around us, but hey, there's only so much we can do now. So we ended up going over to some benches and stuff, but eventually we get pretty bored and decide to go a bit further, and we go to the perimeter of where we are. They'd locked up the area that actually takes you into the forest, which was a bit of a bummer, but it didn't matter. We could literally just climb over. There used to be a big hole in this gate thing, but they covered it up. It was like they would cover it up all the time, then people would just open it again. I don't know why. I make it over safely and so does my friend. Now we have a large hill to go up before we get to the main part of the forest. Now luckily we make it over here, and now we're into the other part. Now again, I don't know why I thought this was a good idea, or my friend did too, but we're ready to explore the big woods on our own in the dark. So we set off basically following the main trail. We still had the common sense to say that we shouldn't get too lost out here, because not only did our parents not know what we were doing, but we didn't know too, so we decided just to follow the path. Luckily there's some railings which really helped us guide our way through here, and again, it doesn't make too much of an issue. Though eventually this does disappear, and now we're kind of deep into it. We probably go for about another 20 minutes or so before eventually we see something. There's some construction gear out in here. Now we're out in the middle of nowhere in the woods and we think this is pretty odd, but we decide to proceed anyway and try and figure out what it is. It's bizarre because this equipment looks like it's 100-year-old, maybe even more. I've never seen anything like it. We were still quite cautious though, just in case there were others around, and have our bearings and wits about us, but there seems to be nobody at all. Again, we think it's pretty odd, but proceed once more. We're basically exploring all around and nothing's really happening, so we decide to go on. That's when we notice it. There's people further up ahead, and they're clearly mining or something. We thought it'd be cool just to watch and see what they're doing. Again, their clothes look quite dated, and both of us think this is rather bizarre. But we just proceed on. It seems almost like they're completely oblivious to us being there. Something just felt odd. We can't actually see them too well too, considering how dark it is, but they've got their fires and stuff going. Kind of like the barrel ones, but different. Now eventually we get quite bored and turn on one of our flashlights, and that's when we hear it. Someone screams, "Hey, hey," and something in a language that neither of us understand. We then hear dogs and start panicking, and we hear some kind of commotion. We both look at each other and turn around. We both start sprinting in the direction that we've come. Now, I'm the first one to get up the hill, but my friend isn't able to. He's a little bit slower, so I have to wait for him to go around. He eventually does so, and we both find our way back to the main part of the park and jump the fence. I want to sprint, but my friend is out of breath, so we both take our time and eventually head back home. We're both very shaken by the incident. However, the weird part is what come next. Probably about 2 years later, we're both extremely curious as to what was actually over there. Also because there's no history of mining that we're aware of or any operations that happened here recently. Now, eventually we make it back over to the site and we can't see anything. There's actually no signs of mining or anything whatsoever. That's until my friend spots it. There's some old gravestones. We then realise that we're standing in some kind of makeshift territory, and we realise that it's an old miner's grave, and the date was almost 100 years ago. Now I can't say too much for certain, but it's almost like we'd stepped into their world, one that was different from our own,